Aloha! You are watching Living Delicious with Helena, our special series, Dying Delicious. I know you may roll your eyes thinking, how can I die delicious? But yes, you can. We are now discovering details and practical ways of living and towards your end of your life and dying in the state of Hawaii. What's possible, what is not, what is legal, what is not. And we have the best person to tell us, Kathryn Tucker. Aloha, Kathryn.
Nice to see you again.
Yes, thank you for coming for this
Thank you.
second part.
Yes.
This is now getting really exciting. The first thing I would like to get right into, what is different in the state of Hawaii than Oregon, Montana, and Washington that already have assisted dying, aiding dying policy going on properly? Mm-hmm. What about Hawaii and causing suicide? Mm-hmm. As far as I understand, this is not allowed. This is not legal in Hawaii. Please explain to us.
Right. So Hawaii is a really interesting state mm-hmm. in that it has taken many steps to give patients a lot of autonomy over medical decision making. So Hawaii, for example, has a Healthcare Decision Act that lets patients express their wishes for end-of-life care in advance. Hawaii has a statute that empowers patients to get pain medication so they will be comfortable. Mm-hmm. Hawaii has an interesting old statute that empowers patients to get any kind of remedial agent that will bring them some kind of relief. So that they can be comfortable as they're dying.
So, excuse me, when you say old statute, are you referring to 1909
yes,
law?
Yes.
So can you tell us more about that law and how the big picture looks like actually?
Right. Well, so more than 100 years ago, yes. Hawaii enacted a statute that permits patients to have and physicians to provide any remedial agent that will bring relief. Mm-hmm. And so that's a very ancient law, and it reflects that very early in the lawmaking in Hawaii, it was understood that citizens should have a lot of autonomy over their end-of-life decision-making, mm-hmm. so they can make decisions for their own death. Mm-hmm. That law is consistent with more recent laws like the Healthcare Decisions Act that I mentioned that lets and empowers patients to fill out living wills and advance directives that clarify what kind of care they want and do not want. Mm-hmm. And it's consistent with an additional enactment directed at ensuring that patients can have as much pain relief as they need. Mm-hmm. All of those laws reflect the decision and the policy of the state to empower patients with decision-making over their medical care. Mm-hmm. Hawaii also, in its constitution, protects privacy, and privacy is understood to include things like how your body is treated in medicine. So whether you want a treatment or don't want a treatment, that is something that is reserved to the individual to decide based on the privacy afforded all Hawaiian citizens under the state constitution.
So that really means that in Hawaii it's easier and smoother and better to die. The last few months we have more autonomy than in other states?
Than in many other states, yes. And that combined with the fact that there's nothing in any law that exists in Hawaii that suggests that there is a basis to punish a doctor who provides aid in dying to a patient.
So, okay, let's say 1909, the law came out. Mm. That must mean, in my perspective, there was a physician or 3 or 5 or 50 on each island who were prescribing some remedial aids that helped people, what?
Be comfortable as they're dying.
Meaning, just be comfortable or shorten up the lifespan and help them die faster?
Right. There isn't really a record of what the legislators were thinking, but clearly from the text of the law, the intention can be understood that the patient should be the one to decide how much suffering to endure before death. And that law, very much consistent with the other ones I mentioned, yes. creates a constellation of laws from which it is clear that the decision-making in this state is meant to reside with the individual patient and not to be controlled by the government.
So if that was meant that way, how come that in only 100 years, while people die every day, even in Hawaii we die every day, how come that today it's such an ancient law that we don't have anymore a physician who will be here and say, I'm the one, or we are the group of 50 of us. There are 10 on each island and we are doing this regularly.
Well, that is starting to emerge. That is starting to emerge. And so, and again, I know you had Dr. Nathanson on, who has stepped forward to say he practices medicine in Hawaii. He's been a founder of the hospice movement in Hawaii, and that he believes that dying patients should be empowered to choose aid in dying, and that he's prepared to provide that to patients in his care who ask for it. And other physicians have now also stepped forward and expressed their willingness to provide that option to their patients. So I think in Hawaii now, where we are at is at an exciting time where doctors are stepping forward and saying, suffering, dying patients should be able to make this choice, and I'm prepared to support them. I think that flows partly from the laws we mentioned, but also in our culture and our society across the nation, there's growing support for this choice. So for example, doctors know that the American Public Health Association, the nation's largest and oldest public health association, supports this choice. And that various of the medical societies, the American Medical Women's Association, the American Medical Students Association, the American College of Legal Medicine. So a lot of groups have started adopting policies saying it's important for patients to have this choice.
As we know, 70% of all Americans are supporting that.
Yes.
However, I would like to know statistic information and how many really physicians we have on the islands who are doing that. Do you know?
Right. I don't think we have that data. I think what we know from some recent polling that's been done in 2012 is that the great majority of physicians believe patients should be empowered to make this choice.
I remember that. We made a show about that.
Right, and it was in the newspaper, And so, you know, certainly among that majority of physicians, a fraction of them, we don't know how large that fraction is, will be willing to provide this to their patients.
So let's see somebody is watching and has a mom or a grandma who is terminally ill and really in pain, and she really wants. She's 93 years old and she wants to die, and she's really just shrinking and suffering.
Right.
Practically, who can she contact?
Right. So a really good place to start is to contact Compassion and Choices, and we have an 800 number, and we also have a website, and I think those are both posted on the screen.
Yes, right here.
Beautiful. And so I would recommend that as a starting point.
Yes.
A patient in any of the 50 states, including Hawaii, can call that 800 number and speak to a very skilled, knowledgeable end-of-life care counselor who does not charge for that service, and who will provide open, candid information about a whole array of choices.
Yes.
Yes, to anyone who is dealing with this issue and who is seeking information.
Yes.
And so that information will include all kinds of choices that the patient can make about aggressive pain and symptom management, foregoing a treatment, having a treatment withdrawn, having palliative sedation, which we talked about on an earlier program, or having the choice for aid in dying. So there's a wide variety of choices, and patients and family members can get information about
let's say the whole family and the grandma, they are still cool and they are choosing, let's do aid in dying.
Right.
What's their next step, and what happens to Dr. Nate?
Right. Right. Well, so the good news is that physicians in Hawaii are stepping forward to say they believe patients should have this choice, and they're willing to provide this choice to their patients. So that's the good news. It is very likely that that patient will be able to find a willing physician. That patient can talk about this issue with Compassion and Choices, can also and should discuss it with their physician, because they may have a willing physician who they are already in a relationship with.
Okay, now I'm a little bit confused, because if somebody already is choosing, this is exactly what I want. I really want that. Everybody is clear. It's a clear mind, no problems. If there is no data on the doctors who are providing that, even if they call Compassion and Choices, and we want aid in dying, who do we contact and how do we get that little magic pill that will relieve us of everything within a few minutes?
Right. So the patient needs to find their way to a physician supportive of this choice.
So you have to do it your own way?
Well,
there
it may be
list
that,
on
well,
the doctors?
it may be that their existing physician is supportive.
Yes.
So that would be a great place to start, because that physician will know the patient's condition, will know the prognosis, will know the patient's ability to make an informed choice. And so that is an important place to start. Mm-hmm. It may be that that physician will say, I'm willing to provide that for you. And then that's beautiful. They go forward in the very private doctor-patient relationship that already exists. Uh-huh. Probably the doctor spends some time talking to the patient about why they want to make that choice and helping the patient understand other choices, so yes. It is a fully informed decision. Mm-hmm. And at the point at which that physician understands this is the patient's choice and is willing to provide it, then it happens very quietly in the existing doctor-patient relationship.
Okay.
If the physician has a personal objection to providing yes. that treatment, mm-hmm. the physician's responsibility is to tell the patient that candidly and to say, I'm not willing to provide that, but I can try to help transfer your care to a willing physician. Mm-hmm. So there is an advisory council of physicians in Hawaii on the question of aid in dying, and yes. I would think that any physician who wants to make that kind of a referral should call the advisory council, which they can reach through the Compassion and Choices office. Okay. And those physicians would be in a position to assist with that transfer of care.
Mm-hmm. So I interviewed personally Dr. Nathanson, mm-hmm. and he said, I am willing.
Yes.
He's keeping his license,
yes.
not practicing, but keeping license just for that.
Right.
However, as far as I understood, there have not yet been any cases of that documented.
No, there have been.
In Hawaii?
In Hawaii,
really?
Yes.
How many?
Mm-hmm.
Do you know?
I don't know, but I know there has been at least one. And again, this happens very much in the privacy of the doctor-patient relationship, yes. Which is a very private and confidential matter. So mm-hmm. we don't know often how frequent it is. Mm-hmm. But we do know, because our counselors have worked with patients in Hawaii, that it is happening.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And then what is, let's say if Dr. Nathanson does this, I love him so much. He's the sweetheart. I really would love to have him by my side if I die. Very kind and he really experienced, he saw lots of death. Mm-hmm. And he has this something about him, very like an old doctor, mm-hmm. the one who mm-hmm. really wants you to get better. Right. Not the one who is watching your time get mm-hmm. out of my
right.
office.
And very supportive of yes. you as the patient being involved in the decision-making and able to make the decision mm-hmm. that's best for you. It's beautiful. So, mm-hmm. Dr. Nathanson has stepped forward to make this very public. Mm-hmm. He takes a bit of risk. And
let's talk about
right.
that.
So,
yes.
I think it is possible, but unlikely, that he could find himself investigated and possibly even prosecuted. I think it would be a stretch of the criminal law to file those kinds of charges because, as I mentioned, I don't think the statutory landscape in Hawaii supports prosecuting a physician for providing aid in dying. Mm-hmm. If Dr. Nate or any physician who provided aid in dying were the subject of an investigation, Compassion and Choices would be very much supportive of the defense of that physician. Mm-hmm. And again, I think a very aggressive argument would be made to the court that there's no grounds for that kind of a prosecution, and we would hope that that case would be thrown out very early.
So that's a hope. If if certain physician prescribes the same aid in dying in Oregon, Montana, and Washington, there is no aggressive prosecutor who will be able to touch them.
Right. They are safe in those jurisdictions.
Yes.
We believe that they are safe in Hawaii, but we have not had a court ruling that establishes that. So there would be a possibility of that kind of a prosecution being initiated that could lead to a court decision recognizing that there is no grounds for prosecution.
What would it take to get that done first so that we have lawyers and the law and everything legal standing in front of us, making that path through the ocean,
right,
so that doctors can just follow and do what they do.
Right.
Doctors know how to help people, lawyers know how to do the law. What would it take for that to happen?
Well, you know, my own view, and we do file cases around the country to have courts opine on this, and that's what we did in Montana, where the law was less clear than it is in Hawaii. So the law in Hawaii is clearer that doctors can provide this without being at risk. So I think we are at the point in our culture and our society where aid in dying, just like every other medical practice, can and should be governed by professional practice standards, without a statute, without a court decision. Most medicine is governed that way, and it's appropriate now that we've had this opportunity to watch and learn from the Oregon statute. You know, we've learned such a tremendous amount from what's happened in
13
Oregon.
years.
14 years,
14
yeah.
years.
And so we now know who chooses aid in dying and why, and whether it puts patients at risk. And the answer to those questions is, you know, it's mostly cancer patients. More than 80% of the patients who choose aid in dying are dying of cancer. The next most common diagnosis is ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. We know that almost all of them are enrolled in hospice, so they're getting excellent pain and symptom management. And we know that what is motivating them is never a single thing. It's an array, a cumulative burden of the inexorable progression of the disease and the bodily deterioration that brings them to a place where there's so much suffering that they find it unbearable. So we know why patients choose this. We know that when this choice is available, it actually improves care for patients of all kinds, because doctors try harder to learn how to treat pain and symptoms. They make referrals to hospice more frequently and earlier, so patients get great pain and symptom management earlier. And those are important benefits that raise the floor for good end-of-life care for all dying patients. And then we know that the number of patients that choose aid in dying is quite small. It's relatively small.
They just like to know they have the option.
The comfort, right. And we see from the experience in Oregon and Washington that more than a third of the patients who go through the process
and
to get their medication, they don't take it. They just feel that comfort of knowing that it's there.
If they
and
need it.
You know, that's so interesting. I don't think anyone expected that, but it's very empowering to have that.
I'd like to ask about one comparison between Montana and Hawaii. You said that Hawaii has clearer laws than Montana. Does Hawaii have harder opposition than Montana?
Well, I think, and again, looking at the poll data that I mentioned that's quite recent from earlier in 2012, there is overwhelming public support across every demographic in the state for patients being empowered to make this choice. And for the government to stay out of this, that the citizens of Hawaii really want this to be a choice between the doctor and the patient in the privacy of that relationship.
Yes, but still, doctors love patients, patients love doctors. I'm in pain, doctor prescribes me, and here my Dr. Nathanson, to help me die, he's gonna spend his last 5 or whatever years in jail?
Well, I hope not, and I don't think so.
Yes.
But, you know, he's certainly...
Can we reassure that? How can we reassure that he can walk on the street proud that he's helping people, that he's contributing to society, being healthier and less dramatic than being scared that he will end up in jail? Or patients not approaching because they want to protect him?
Right. You know, there's not an absolute guarantee. I think he can feel safe given the analysis that has been done of the law in Hawaii and the fact that there is such a tenuous ground for a prosecution. Can he feel 100% safe, or can he feel guaranteed of safety? No. I think that would come only with a statutory protection and immunity.
How do we get that?
Well, you know, here's the thing. Again, I don't think it is necessary to go into the legislature like was done in Oregon and Washington, because again, it's so extraordinary that you would govern a medical practice by a statute. It's very unusual.
Not to govern medical practice, but more to protect the physicians who are willing to help.
Right. Well, so the way physicians are protected in their practice of medicine, because again, let's remember, we empower physicians to take a knife and cut open a body. Now, if another human being who wasn't a physician took a knife and cut open a body, they'd be at risk for murder. There isn't a statute that authorizes surgery. What there is professional practice standards where that physician's action of cutting open the body is governed by whether other physicians believe that is the appropriate treatment for that condition. And that's how we regulate the practice of medicine. And the same should be done with aid in dying.
So then how is Hawaii different than the other 3 states? Is there is that law, or what is missing to make it completely legal and completely smooth?
Well, again, I mean, Hawaii we are in a different point in time than Oregon was in 1994 when it passed its permissive statute. And we're at a different point in time than 2008 when Washington passed its statute. And so again, I think the fact of that progression of years has brought us to the place where medicine does see this issue as within standard of care, within best professional practice to offer patients this. And that wasn't true back in 1994. I think all of the states benefited from seeing what happened in Oregon and learned from it. But we don't need to continue replicating that statute. That statute was rather extraordinary, and it reflected that it was a first time. And Hawaii now has learned from, as the other states have learned from Oregon, and can proceed without a statute, can proceed with governance through professional practice standards.
So let's play, role play. You who know so much about, you are probably in the whole United States of America, you know, in the world, you know the most about this issue from the legal point of view. Let's say your daughter is a physician, and she really likes certain patients. She works with terminally ill people, and they develop a beautiful relationship where she is watching them die, and they choose to get their aid in dying pill. What would you, as a loving mother, suggest to her daughter? Yes, prescribe, or no?
Well, I think she would be relatively safe, just as I think Dr. Nate is relatively safe. And again, you know, various people have a various level of risk tolerance. So someone who's very risk averse would say, without absolute certainty, I won't do this. And that's their own judgment. Someone who says, I believe in this, I believe this is my duty to my patient, I believe this is within my professional ethics and responsibility, and I'm willing to do this without a guarantee of safety. If you are that kind of a doctor, then you'll feel comfortable.
So what would you say to your daughter?
I would say if you're willing to accept this relatively small amount of risk to do what you feel is right, I applaud you, I salute you, I'm honored to know you.
So you would be able, if some aggressive opponent comes, you would be able to pull from everywhere certain kind of legal documents that will support that process for other patients as well in Hawaii.
Right. Very strong argument to be made in court if a prosecution were ever filed, that prosecution should be thrown out.
So if the prosecution is filed, who would file it?
It would be the prosecuting attorneys of the state.
Who is, let's say, my grandma, who is against it? It's our personal choice, our personal decision. Who will be the one who would be against us?
Well,
probably.
You know, sometimes prosecutors, because they are political and have political ambitions, might think this will advance my career if I bring this kind of case. Now again,
so ego-driven stuff.
Yeah, and or career-driven. But again, I think anyone who looks at the poll data knows that most residents of the state, most voters, support this choice. So that doesn't seem like a wise calculation. So I think it's unlikely. We have not seen a prosecution. We did in October do a very public conference that was held at the state capitol.
Exactly. Yeah, we have 3 minutes to ask you that
question.
Well,
we had a big panel of many different leaders from many different communities across the state, communities of law, medicine, policy, politics, and we sat up on the stage at the Capitol and talked about the fact that aid in dying is something physicians should feel safe doing in Hawaii. Yes. And that was back in October, and here we are now in June, and we haven't seen a prosecution, even though it's been very much in the paper that doctors are open and willing to provide this, even though Dr. Nate has come on your program.
Yes.
So again, I think that the chance of that is very small, and we're really now working hard to continue the education we started in October to really help patients and doctors know that this is something that patients can and should be able to choose.
And what about the disagreement that Attorney General had with you?
Right. Well, so the Attorney General's office, through a lower level staff member at that office, issued an opinion saying their office believes a prosecution could be brought. Now, that is a kind of a predictable outcome because the Attorney General's office is in the business of saying we can prosecute anyone that we want to when we feel like it. Yes. So, I mean, in some sense, they were simply rattling their saber. I think I know we haven't seen that prosecution initiated. I think the legal reasoning that office supported its opinion with was very weak, and it is subject to review by a court. So again, I think if a prosecution were brought and the Attorney General was maintaining that position, it would be the court that would be the ultimate authority on whether there was a ground for prosecution. And that court might hold a very different view for the reasons I've outlined.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So somebody's now watching, they have a situation. What is the most calming and peaceful advice that you can give them that can help them transit to next level?
Right. To feel free to contact one of our end-of-life care counselors and have a really candid conversation. Call the 800 number that we've offered at Compassion and Choices, or come on our website. A lot of information is available.
Do you have an office that somebody can walk in?
We have an office here in Hawaii. I think that we typically take intake from patients over the phone and over the email.
I see.
Partly because patients who are dying often don't want to travel to an office, but partly just it maintains the confidentiality both of the office and the patient. So,
but if they want some personal care,
yes, we do have end-of-life care counselors who visit patients in their homes, and often patients will choose to invite that counselor to be with them when they act to ingest the medication. They find it comforting to have someone there. They may also invite their physician, and often the physicians attend. And the patient and the family find a lot of comfort in having someone there who's been through this before.
Good. Thank you so much, Kathryn.
Thank you so much.
This was very deep information, although I wanted to hear that no problem, Nate. Go, everything is fine. We have your back, we have your front. Let's just make it happen like it's in Montana and Oregon. Washington too, but we have what we have. Thank you for information.
Thank you so much.
Yes. For more details, please contact compassionandchoices.com. Search for them. You can get all the information.
.org.
And .org, pardon. Or you can call me at 266-0717. And see you next time on the other side when we can die delicious. Bye.